He found two abandoned babies in a dumpster and gave them everything when he had nothing. Decades later, they returned, not just with gratitude, but with a gift that would change his life forever. What began as a single act of kindness became a legacy of love, redemption, and a community transformed. This is the unforgettable story of Marcus Tremaine, the man who saved lives and, in the end, was saved in return. Please subscribe to our channel. We are trying to build a community where kindness will be our most used and honored word. Watch to the end to witness a reunion that will move you to tears and remind you that one act of compassion can ripple through generations. Marcus Tremaine was a shadow in the city's margins, a wiry man with a snow-dusted beard and eyes heavy with years of struggle. He navigated the back alleys and cracked sidewalks with a quiet grace few noticed. His threadbare navy coat, patched at the seams with clumsy stitches, hung loosely on his frame, and his wool cap, frayed and too thin for winter's bite, barely shielded his ears from the cold. He pushed a creaking cart piled high with dog-eared books, salvaged wires, a cracked transistor radio, and a pair of faded blankets, their edges worn from years of use. To the bustling city, Marcus was invisible, a fleeting figure in the urban haze, his presence swallowed by the clamor of traffic and hurried footsteps. Yet his mind was sharp, his hands steady despite their calluses, and his spirit, though battered by loss, still flickered with a stubborn defiance that refused to be extinguished. Take a moment to subscribe to our channel, so we can spread the word of kindness and hope to everyone, just as Marcus's story inspires us to do. His heart, despite life's relentless blows, refused to harden. Once Marcus had been a master tinkerer, a man who could coax life from broken things. In his younger days, he'd run a small repair shop on Linden Avenue, a cluttered nook where the hum of tools mingled with the scent of grease, sawdust, and old coffee. The shop was modest, its shelves a jumble of old radios with dials stuck in time, broken clocks frozen mid-tick, and half-fixed lamps waiting for new wires. Marcus loved the work, finding joy in the puzzle of each repair. He could breathe life into anything, a toaster that hadn't popped in years, a music box that had lost its song, a child's toy car with a busted wheel. He'd shared that life with his wife, Clara, whose warm laugh could fill a room and whose gentle touch could soften any sorrow. Their daughter, Hannah, at 9, had watched him work with wide eyes, calling him the man who fixes the world. Those were the days when hope felt tangible, when the future seemed as bright as Clara's smile and as certain as the morning sun through their shop's dusty window. But fate has a way of unraveling dreams. When Clara was diagnosed with leukemia, their world fractured like glass under a hammer. The medical bills piled up like falling bricks, crushing their savings, their plans, their peace. Marcus sold his shop, its sign reading Tremaine's Repairs, fading into memory. He parted with his tools, each wrench and screwdriver a piece of his identity, and even the silver locket Clara had given him on their 12th anniversary, engraved with "Forever my spark," its weight a reminder of promises unkept. He took odd jobs, fixing neighbors' appliances for pennies, hauling scrap for $1 a load, anything to keep Clara alive. But the disease was relentless, and Clara slipped away, her final smile a faint echo in the hospital's sterile light, her hand cold in his. Hannah, then 15, was consumed by grief and anger, her once bright spirit darkened by loss. Their fights grew bitter, Marcus's exhaustion clashing with her rebellion, her pain spilling into words neither could take back. One night, after a shouting match that left the air heavy with regret, Hannah slung her backpack over her shoulder and vanished into the city's sprawl. No note, no goodbye. That was the day Marcus stopped fixing things. He started walking instead, his cart his only anchor, its wheels groaning under the weight of his solitude. Each morning Marcus traced the city's quieter paths, moving like a ghost through its veins. He knew the warm vents behind the old cinema, where steam rose in soft clouds, the bakery bins with day-old croissants still soft beneath their crust, and the church basement that served chili on Tuesdays, where volunteers offered a nod and a bowl. He never begged, never complained. Pride was his armor, forged in the fires of loss. He'd nod to passers-by, his eyes catching theirs for a fleeting moment before they looked away, seeing only a shadow. But on one bone-chilling morning everything changed. The sky was a heavy grey, snowflakes swirling like lost thoughts. As Marcus trudged down Willow Lane, a narrow alley behind Carver's grocery, a rusted dumpster loomed, its sides dented and streaked, often holding bruised apples or stale bagels he could salvage. He approached, scanning for anything edible, his breath clouding in the cold, his fingers numb beneath tattered gloves. A faint cry stopped him cold. At first, he thought it was a stray cat, its mewl muffled by the wind. But the sound was too human, too desperate. His heart thudded as he neared the dumpster, his gnarled fingers gripping the icy lid, its metal biting through his gloves. He lifted it, and time seemed to freeze. Nestled between trash bags, wrapped in a single tattered scarf stained with grime, were two newborns. Their tiny bodies, chilled and fragile, trembled in the frost, their skin dusky from the cold. The boy whimpered softly, his cries barely audible, a fragile thread of life. The girl was still, her breaths so faint they were nearly invisible, her eyelids fluttering like moth wings. Marcus's chest tightened, a wave of panic and purpose crashing over him. For a moment he couldn't move, the weight of the moment pinning him. Then instinct surged, raw and urgent. He tore off his coat, the only warmth he had, and bundled the infants tightly. The small forms pressed against his heart. "You're safe now." "Little ones," he whispered, his voice steady despite his shaking hands, the words a vow to the universe. He moved fast, navigating icy sidewalks and dim streetlights, his worn boots slipping on frost but never faltering. Grace Haven Hospital was 4 blocks away, its sign a beacon in the dawn. His knees screamed with each step, his arms ached under the precious weight. But he didn't stop, driven by a force deeper than pain. Bursting through the hospital doors, he reached the reception, breathless, his face flushed with cold and fear. The nurse, a woman named Miriam, with kind eyes and a quick step, gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Help them!" Marcus rasped, his voice raw as gravel. "They're freezing." The emergency room sprang to life like a well-oiled machine. Nurses whisked the babies to a warming station, their hands swift and sure. Doctors shouted orders, their voices cutting through the chaos. The pediatric teams swarmed, their faces taut with focus. Marcus stood in the hallway, his shirt soaked with sweat and melting snow, watching through a glass window as the infants were tended, their tiny forms swallowed by medical equipment. Miriam approached, her voice gentle but urgent. "Where did you find them?" "In a dumpster," Marcus said, his throat tight, the words heavy with disbelief. "Behind Carver's grocery." She touched his arm, her hand warm against his chilled skin. "Your coat kept them alive." Marcus stayed through the night, refusing to leave despite his exhaustion, his body slumped against a wall, but his eyes fixed on the nursery door. A custodian handed him a coffee, its warmth seeping into his hands. A volunteer offered a dry jacket, its weight a small comfort. "I just need to know they're okay," he told Miriam, his voice barely above a whisper. At dawn, Miriam returned, her face alight with relief, a smile breaking through her fatigue. "They're going to make it," she said. "We've named them for now, Eli and Lila, after your wife. We heard you mention her. They're stable." Marcus's eyes brimmed with tears, his breath catching as relief flooded him. He didn't know who had left them or why, but holding those children had reignited a spark he thought was gone forever, a flicker of purpose that warmed the cold corners of his soul. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a constant presence at Grace Haven. He visited daily, lingering outside the nursery, watching Eli and Lila grow stronger, their tiny limbs gaining color and strength. Miriam shared updates, Lila's tiny fingers curling around a blanket, Eli's fascination with a soft mobile that spun above his crib, its colors dancing in the light. Marcus brought small gifts, a knitted hat from a thrift store, its wool soft and warm, a toy he'd repaired, its wheels spinning smoothly again. His weathered face began to soften, his smiles returning, tentative at first, but growing with each visit. But Marcus knew the world wasn't kind to men like him. Social services arrived, their clipboards and forms a stark reminder of his place. The twins were slated for foster care, destined for a system that offered no room for a man with no home, no income, no claim. His heart begged to keep them, to shield them from the world's cruelty. But the system was unyielding, its rules carved in stone. On the day they were taken, Miriam stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her own eyes glistening. "You gave them a chance," she said. "That's more than most." Marcus nodded, tears falling as the twins were wheeled away, their tiny forms disappearing down a sterile corridor. He returned to the streets, but he wasn't the same. He began fixing things again. Radios salvaged from scrap heaps, bikes abandoned in alleys, their frames rusted but salvageable. He gave them to shelters, taught a young runaway named Tommy to rewire a fan, fixed a neighbor's creaky porch swing that sang with each breeze. He kept moving, kept mending, because a quiet hope whispered he'd see those children again. Marcus hadn't always been a wanderer. Born in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, where the hum of washers was his lullaby, he grew up watching his father, a plumber named Amos, fix pipes with a craftsman's pride, his hands steady and sure. Young Marcus was curious, dismantling radios by age 10, his small fingers prying open casings to uncover their secrets. He earned pocket money, repairing neighbors' toasters and clocks, his grin wide when they worked again. At 19, he met Clara at a community dance, her laughter pulling him like a magnet across a crowded room. They married young, built a life on small joys, a shared coffee at dawn. Clara's singing in the kitchen as she baked bread, Hannah's crayon drawings taped to the fridge, her stick-figure family beaming with lopsided smiles. The shop on Linden Avenue was their dream, a place where Marcus's skill and Clara's warmth made customers feel like family, lingering over coffee as he fixed their radios. But loss. First his parents in a car accident when he was 25. Then Clara taught him how fragile dreams could be, how quickly they could slip through even the steadiest hands. After Clara's death, Marcus's world grew smaller, his days measured by the rhythm of his cart's wheels. He'd walk for hours, his eyes scanning the ground for anything useful, a discarded book, a broken watch, a scrap of wire. He learned the city's pulse, its hidden corners where the forgotten gathered. He'd sit by the river some evenings, watching the water ripple under streetlights, wondering where Hannah had gone, if she was safe, if she ever thought of him. He left notes at shelters and community boards, scrawled with her name and his, but years passed without a reply, each silence a fresh wound. Yet he kept walking, kept surviving, his cart a testament to his refusal to break. 20 years passed since that dumpster morning. Marcus's beard was now fully white, his gait slower, his hands knotted with arthritis but still nimble, capable of delicate repairs. He lived at Unity Shelter, a weathered building where the walls echoed with stories of loss and resilience. Unity was more than a roof, it was a community, a patchwork family of souls carrying heavy pasts. There was Rose, a former librarian with a sharp wit who taught reading classes, her glasses slipping down her nose as she read aloud. Jamal, a teen Marcus mentored in repair, his quick hands learning to solder with a focus that mirrored Marcus's own. And Father Daniel, a priest with a gentle voice who ran the shelter with quiet faith, his sermons laced with hope. Marcus became the shelter's unofficial handyman, fixing leaky pipes that dripped through the night, rewiring lamps that flickered in the common room, even building a bookshelf from scrap wood, its shelves soon filled with donated novels. Rose called him the glue, always there to mend what was broken, objects and spirits alike, his quiet presence a steadying force. Every November 12th, Marcus returned to the alley behind Carver's grocery, not to dwell on pain, but to honor the moment that had given him purpose. He left small offerings, a wool blanket folded neatly, a pair of mittens knitted by a shelter volunteer, a note with the shelter's address in his careful handwriting, hoping to spare another child the twins' fate. The neighborhood began to notice his ritual. Mrs. Alvarez, the grocer's wife, with her apron dusted with flour, left him hot cocoa on cold mornings, the mug warm in his hands. A local mechanic, Mr. Reyes, traded tools for Marcus's help, fixing a car lift, their banter a rare lightness in his days. Marcus never accepted charity outright but bartered repairs, a toaster for a loaf of bread, a radio for a pair of gloves, keeping his dignity intact, his pride a shield against pity. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Eli and Lila had grown up in a loving foster home in a nearby suburb, a modest house with a garden where roses bloomed each spring. Their adoptive parents, the Thompsons, a schoolteacher and a carpenter, told them of Marcus, the stranger who'd saved them from a dumpster's cold embrace. The story became their anchor, a touchstone for their dreams. Lila, haunted by her near death, pursued medicine, her hands steady as she trained to become a pediatric surgeon, driven to save children like herself, to give them the chance she'd been given. Eli, inspired by the idea of safe spaces, studied architecture, designing affordable housing and community centers with sturdy walls and warm lights, places where no one would feel abandoned. As children, they'd faced challenges. Lila's quiet intensity made her a target for bullies, while Eli's sensitivity led to fights. He couldn't win, but the Thompsons' love steadied them, teaching them resilience. As teenagers, they began searching for Marcus, checking shelters and city records, their young hearts burning with gratitude. His transient life made him a ghost, their searches hitting dead ends. But their hope, though tested, never died. In their 20s, Lila and Eli's search intensified, fueled by their growing success and a deepening need to repay their debt. Lila volunteered at Grace Haven, hoping for clues, her scrubs stained with long shifts, but her eyes sharp for any mention of Marcus. Eli used his non-profits network, reaching out to shelter directors and social workers, his sketches of community centers pinned to his office walls. They faced setbacks, old records lost, leads that went cold, but their bond as siblings kept them going, their shared memory of Marcus a guiding star. A breakthrough came at a hospital fundraiser, where they met Miriam, now retired but volunteering, her hair grey but her memory sharp. She remembered Marcus, mentioning his time at Unity Shelter and his repair workshops, how he'd fixed a broken heater in the hospital's waiting room years ago. Lila and Eli visited Unity, their hearts racing as they learned of Marcus's quiet heroism, his classes for teens, his alley vigils, his knack for fixing broken things and broken souls. They planned a grand gesture, a banquet to honor him, and a gift to give him the stability he'd never had, a way to say thank you for the life he'd given them. Their planning was meticulous, a labor of love. Lila and Eli worked late nights, pooling their savings to fund the event, choosing Evergreen Hall for its warmth and grandeur. They invited community leaders, shelter residents, and hospital staff who'd known Marcus, wanting the night to reflect his impact. Lila wrote the invitation herself, her pen trembling as she poured gratitude into each word. Eli designed a slideshow, images of their lives interwoven with the house they'd built for Marcus. A cozy haven with a porch swing and a garden where wildflowers could grow. They rehearsed their speeches, their voices cracking as they practiced, knowing the moment would be as much for them as for him. One crisp autumn day, a letter arrived at Unity Shelter, its envelope edged in gold, addressed to Mr. Marcus Tremaine. Inside, on thick parchment, was a handwritten note. Dear Mr. Tremaine, you once saved 2 lives. We've never forgotten. Please join us as our guest of honor at the Evergreen Hall, December 18th, 7 p.m. No formal attire needed. Just bring yourself. No signature. But the handwriting stirred something in Marcus, a faint memory of hope. He thought it a mistake. Invitations didn't come to men like him, men whose lives were measured in cartwheels and cold nights. Yet Rose urged him to go, her eyes bright with intuition. Sensing something profound, on December 18th, Marcus wore his cleanest plaid shirt, its buttons polished with care, and a wool coat from a shelter volunteer, its warmth a rare luxury. He shined his shoes with a rag and a bit of lotion, combed his thinning hair, and stood a little taller, his heart pounding with a mix of doubt and curiosity. He took a donated van to Evergreen Hall, the city lights blurring past as he wondered what awaited. The hall was a vision of light, its lobby buzzing with elegantly dressed guests and the clink of champagne. Flutes against trays. Marcus hesitated at the entrance, his rough hands clutching the letter, feeling like an outsider in a world of silk and suits. The hostess, a young woman with a kind smile and a name tag reading Emma, greeted him. "Mr. Tremaine." He nodded, cautious, his voice caught in his throat. "This way." She led him to a grand ballroom, its chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables draped in white linen. Marcus felt out of place among the suits and gowns, his patched coat a stark contrast to the finery. But the lights dimmed, and a young woman in a sleek blazer took the podium. Her presence was commanding, her voice steady, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Good evening," she began. "Tonight is about gratitude, about a man who changed everything." A man joined her, tall and broad-shouldered, his smile warm but emotional, his eyes catching the light. 20 years ago," she continued, "my brother and I were left in a dumpster. We don't remember that day, but we know who gave us a future." The man spoke, his voice thick with feeling. A man with nothing but his coat. A man who didn't walk away. A man who gave us everything when he had nothing. Marcus's heart pounded, a tidal wave of realization crashing over him. A volunteer, her badge reading Grace Haven Staff, guided him toward the stage, her hand gentle on his arm. The room erupted in a standing ovation, the sound overwhelming, a wave of warmth that shook him to his core. The siblings stepped down, embracing him, their arms strong and sure. "I'm Lila," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "And I'm Eli," the man said, his eyes glistening with tears. "You named us, even if you didn't know it." Marcus's voice failed him, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as the crowd cheered, some wiping their eyes, others clapping until their hands ached. Lila addressed the room, her voice steady again. "Because of Marcus, I'm a pediatric surgeon, saving children like we were, giving them a chance to grow. Eli's an architect, building homes and community centers for those in need, creating spaces where hope can thrive." The crowd murmured in awe, their faces a sea of admiration. Eli grinned, a spark of joy breaking through his emotion. "But we're here to give back." A screen lit up behind them, showing a cozy house with a wraparound porch, a swing swaying gently, and a blooming garden filled with wildflowers. Leila pressed a keyring into Marcus's hand, the metal cool and heavy. "This is yours," she said. "Paid in full in your name." Marcus shook his head, stunned, his breath catching. "I can't." Eli cut in, his voice firm but kind. "You already did." "There's more," Lila added, her smile soft. "A monthly stipend to ease your days, full medical coverage to keep you well, and a workshop out back, stocked with tools so you can keep fixing things." The applause swelled again, a thunderous wave that filled the room. Marcus sank into a chair, overwhelmed, his hands trembling as he clutched the keys. "Why me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Eli knelt beside him, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Because you didn't wait for thanks. You acted when no one else would." The story hit the news the next day, headlines blazing, "From forgotten to found, the man who saved." Twinsen was saved in return. 2 weeks later, Marcus moved into the house, its walls warm with possibility. Neighbors brought casseroles, their dishes steaming with kindness, and warm welcomes, their smiles genuine. Children dropped off broken toys, a robot with a missing arm, a bike with a flat tire for him to fix, their eyes bright with trust. The workshop became Marcus's sanctuary, a shed filled with tools, wires, and wood scraps, its air thick with the scent of oil and sawdust. He started repair classes for local kids, teaching them to fix radios and bikes, their laughter filling the space as they learned to solder and hammer. The neighborhood embraced him, calling him Mr. Fix-It, a title that warmed his heart. Mrs. Alvarez invited him to Sunday dinners, her kitchen alive with the aroma of roasted peppers and fresh bread. Mr. Reyes traded car parts for Marcus's help with a truck engine, their work punctuated by stories of their youth. Every Sunday, Lila and Eli visited, bringing groceries and stories, Lila's youngest patients, their small hands gripping hers as they healed. Eli's latest community center, its walls painted with murals by local artists, They laughed over pie, shared quiet moments by the fire, or worked together in the workshop. Eli learning Marcus's tricks with a soldering iron, his hands growing as steady as his mentor's. One spring morning, a woman appeared at Marcus's door, her silhouette framed by the rising sun. Her hair was streaked with grey, her eyes unmistakably Hannah's, carrying the same spark Clara once had. She'd seen the news, tracked him down through the shelter's network. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, a single word heavy with years of absence. They stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken apologies, then embraced, tears falling as they held each other. Hannah had wandered for years, battling addiction and loss, living in shelters and on streets not unlike Marcus's own. The story of his heroism had reached her in a halfway house, a spark that pulled her back to herself. She was a social worker now, helping runaways like she'd once been, her life a mirror of redemption. They rebuilt their bond slowly, coffee mornings on the porch, shared repairs in the workshop, stories of Clara that brought both pain and healing. Hannah joined Marcus's classes, teaching kids to paint furniture, her laughter echoing her mother's, a melody that filled the house with light. Marcus continued his annual pilgrimage to the alley, leaving blankets and notes, but now the community joined him, turning his solitary ritual into a collective act of hope. Kids from his classes painted the dumpster with bright murals, butterflies, stars, a rising sun, transforming it into a symbol of renewal. Leela and Eli funded a shelter program in Marcus's name, providing supplies for abandoned infants, diapers, formula, tiny clothes, ensuring no child would face the cold they had. The alley became a gathering place, where neighbors left donations under Marcus's quiet guidance, their contributions a testament to his influence. He never sought the spotlight, but his story inspired the city, with local papers calling him the Heart of Willow Lane, a man whose compassion had reshaped a community. As months turned to years, Marcus's home became a hub of connection, its doors always open. Lila and Eli brought their partners, then their children, to Sunday dinners, the table groaning under the weight of shared meals. Hannah moved nearby, her own daughter Lily, calling Marcus Grandpa Fix, her small hands clutching his as they fixed a toy together. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and small victories. Eli's new community center, its ribbon-cutting ceremony filled with cheers. Lila's life-saving surgeries, her steady hands a gift to countless families. Hannah's work with at-risk youth, her empathy a bridge to their futures. Marcus, once invisible, was now surrounded by love. He'd sit on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. A repaired radio playing Clara's favorite song, its notes carrying memories of her voice. The twins' gift had given him more than a house. It had given him family, purpose, a full circle of love that mended the cracks in his heart. Marcus's early years on the streets were not without their own stories, moments that shaped him before the twins entered his life. After Hannah left, he'd wandered the city in a fog of grief, sleeping under bridges and in doorways, his cart a shield against the world's indifference. He'd met others like him, men and women whose lives had been upended by loss, addiction, or bad luck. There was Eddie, a former chef who shared scraps of wisdom and food from a soup kitchen. Maria, a painter whose canvases were now cardboard signs, her hands still steady with a brush. Marcus learned from them, trading stories for warmth, fixing their broken radios for a shared meal. One winter he'd found a young girl, no older than Hannah had been, shivering in an alley. He gave her his blanket, walked her to a shelter, and stayed until she was safe. A small act that echoed the one that would define him years later. These moments, small and fleeting, kept his humanity alive, reminding him he could still make a difference, even in the shadows. The twins, too, had their own trials beyond their search for Marcus. Lila's medical training was grueling, her nights spent studying under flickering dorm lights, her days haunted by the faces of children she couldn't save. She carried Marcus's story like a talisman, whispering it to herself during moments of doubt, his sacrifice fueling her resolve. Eli faced his own challenges, his early designs rejected by firms who saw no profit in affordable housing. He worked odd jobs, construction, drafting to fund his studies, his hands calloused but his vision clear. Their adoptive parents, the Thompsons, were their rock, their home a safe harbor where Lila and Eli could dream. Mrs. Thompson, a school teacher, taught them to read the world with kindness. Mr. Thompson, a carpenter, showed them how to build with care. The twins' gratitude for Marcus grew with each milestone, their search for him a thread woven through their lives. Marcus's work at Unity Shelter expanded over the years, his repair workshops becoming a cornerstone of the community. He taught more than mechanics. He taught patience, resilience, the value of second chances. Jamal, the teen he mentored, became his shadow, following him through the shelter's halls, learning to fix everything from radios to broken dreams. When Jamal landed a job at a garage, he brought Marcus a toolbox engraved with teacher, the gift that left Marcus speechless. Rose, the librarian, shared books with Marcus. Their late-night talks about poetry and loss a quiet bond. Father Daniel often joined them, his stories of faith grounding Marcus, reminding him that purpose could be found in the smallest acts. These relationships, forged in the shelter's dim light, gave Marcus a family before he knew he needed one. The alley's transformation was another chapter in Marcus's legacy. After the murals, local artists added sculptures, small figures made of scrap metal, symbolizing hope rising from despair. The city council, moved by Marcus's story, installed a bench nearby, its plaque reading, "In honor of Marcus Tremaine, who gave life to others." School groups visited, leaving blankets and learning about compassion, their young voices echoing as they painted new murals each year. Lila and Eli's shelter program grew, partnering with hospitals and social services to create a network for abandoned children, each package marked with a note inspired by Marcus. The alley, once a place of despair, became a beacon, its story told in classrooms and churches across the city. On the 21st anniversary of finding the twins, Marcus, now frailer but still sharp, hosted a gathering at his home. Lila and Eli arrived with their families, their children chasing fireflies in the garden. Hannah came with her daughter, Lily, who carried a drawing of their family, Marcus, at its center. Neighbors filled the garden, their tables laden with food, Mrs. Alvarez's tamales, Mr. Reyes's homemade salsa, Rose's apple pie. Jamal, now a mechanic with a shop of his own, brought a radio he'd fixed with Marcus's old lessons, its music filling the air. Rose read a poem she'd written about second chances, her voice trembling with emotion. Father Daniel blessed the gathering, calling Marcus a light in the dark, his words a prayer for all who'd found hope through him. As the evening wound down, Marcus stood, his voice steady despite his years. "I didn't save those babies for thanks," he said. "I saved them because it was right. But you've saved me." The crowd toasted him, their cheers mingling with fireflies in the dusk, the air alive with warmth. Marcus looked at Lila, Eli, Hannah, Lily, and the faces around him, feeling Clara's presence in the soft breeze, her song in the radio's notes. The man who'd once pulled two infants from a dumpster now lived surrounded by dignity, community, and love, a legacy born from a single act of compassion that rippled across a lifetime, touching hearts he'd never know. Years later, Marcus's story continued to spread, a quiet legend that inspired others. A local school named a scholarship after him, helping kids like Jamal pursue trades. Lila and Eli expanded their program, opening a center where families could find support, its walls decorated with photos of Marcus's workshop classes. Hannah wrote a book about her journey, dedicating it to her father, its pages filled with lessons of forgiveness and resilience. Marcus, now in his late 70s, still fixed things, radios, bikes, the occasional heart, his hands slower but his spirit bright. He'd walk to the alley some mornings, not to leave offerings, but to sit on the bench, watching children play nearby, their laughter a reminder of the life he'd given. The city had changed, but Marcus's mark remained, a testament to the power of one choice, one moment, one heart that refused to turn away. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of resilience, kindness, and unexpected turns. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching.